Good morning. Today is Sunday, October 29th, 2023. Before I begin, I want to share something I read from my colleague and friend, Rabbi Kenny Brander. He's the head of a network of schools and yeshivos in Israel. And he said that last Friday, before Shabbos, a group of his students who were soldiers came to see him just before Shabbos. They were on their way to being called up to the front. And they came to gather with their teacher, with their Rebbe, with Rabbi Brander. And so he asked them one by one, going around the room, for each person to share what their deepest prayer was. What were they praying for? And obviously, many of the soldiers prayed that they would be successful in battle, that they would come home safely, unharmed in body and in spirit. But he said the overwhelming majority of these soldiers expressed at this moment of great honesty and openness that their deepest prayer was that they should not, God forbid, cause unnecessary harm or death to innocent civilians during the fighting in Gaza. Now, this is not about politics. This is not about world opinion or propaganda or military strategy or anything of that. This is about the character of our young and men and women, of whom I am so proud and in whose hands we entrust our security. May God protect them, because they are the jewels of the Jewish people. Yesterday in the Torah we read the opening instruction God has for Avraham. God says to Avraham, Lech lecha mi'artzecha. I want you to leave, go on a journey. And I want you to go to this place that I will show you. I'm not even telling you where it is now, but this place that I'm going to show you, the Eschel L'Goy Gadol, I will make you into a great nation, va'avarachecha, and I will bless you. That's what God says to Avraham. And without any hesitation, without any questioning, Avraham listens. And Avraham and Sarah and Lot, they go. They go. And as we read in yesterday's Torah portion, almost as soon as they get to Israel, they have to leave. They have to leave because there's a famine in the land. They have to go to Egypt. And not only that, but they have to make up a charade. They have to say something that's not true, that Sarah is really Avraham's sister, not his wife, because otherwise they would be in danger. Hold on a second. What happened to God's blessing? I mean, God just said, you go to the place, I'm going to make you a great nation, I'm going to bless you. What happened to God's blessing immediately? What happened? They had to choose between some kind of dangerous situation and a morally questionable decision. And right there at the beginning, the Eschel L'Goy Gadol, I will make of you a great nation. Now that promise to Avraham, that there would be a great and mighty nation that would be descended from him, that was repeated 3 more times. A total of 4 times God says to Moshe, God says to Avraham, I'm going to make of you a great nation. As numerous as the dust of the earth. Look at the sky and count the stars. You can't count the stars. You won't be able to count the number of Jewish people. And Avraham believed God. V'hamin b'Hashem. Avraham believed God. God made promises. And then God was more specific in this week's coming portion. Vezbrisi hasim es Yitzchak, asher tele lecha Sarah lamoed hazeh b'shana ha'acheres. God makes it clear through which son this multitude of descendants will come, through Yitzchak. And it's against this background of 4 promises of countless children through Yitzchak that in this week's Torah portion, God says to Avraham, Vayomer kachna es bincha, take your son, es yechidcha, your only son, asher ahavta, the one you love, es Yitzchak, v'haleu la'ola, and offer him as an offering. Taking a step back and looking a bit wider, the most perplexing part of this entire narrative is the disconnect between God's promises and Avraham's reality. In addition to the 4 times that God promises numerous descendants, and then says Yitzchak has to be offered as an offering, which means that whole story is over, apparently. 7 times, God promised Avraham that the land of Israel. 7 times. And yet by the time that Sarah died, that's going to be in 2 weeks, the Parsha Chayei Sarah, and by the time that Sarah died, which is near the end of Avraham's life, that promise was nowhere to be found. Avraham had to haggle over purchasing a small plot of land in order to bury Sarah. What happened to the promises? And so what we see, starting in last week's Torah portion, continuing in this week's portion, and continuing after that, what we see in this entire narrative is a pattern. And the pattern is that Avraham was learning that there is a long and winding road between promise and fulfillment. It's not because God doesn't keep his word. God forbid, God does keep his word. But it's because Avraham and his descendants were charged with bringing something new into the world, a new society, a sacred society, that would have a more intimate relationship with God than any other society had known. And God was teaching Avraham from the very beginning that what I am asking of you, what I am offering you, demands extraordinary strengths of character. Because here's the truth: nothing great and transformative happens overnight. And if you want to create something great and transformative, you have to keep going. Even when you're tired, even when you're lost, even when you're exhausted, even when you're despondent. God will bring about everything he promised, but not immediately, and not directly. God is looking for a people who have the tenacity of faith to keep going despite all the setbacks. That is what God finds in Avraham, and that is what God is offering to Avraham. And that is what the life of Avraham is all about. And that, of course, is the story of Jewish history. And it is our story today. The trial of the binding of Isaac, Akedas Yitzchak, that we will read in this week's Torah portion, is not only about the apparent immorality of human sacrifice, it's also about the uncertainty of God appearing to contradict what God himself had said. But Rabbi Jonathan Sacks expresses it this way: Avraham taught us that faith is not certainty. It is the courage to live with uncertainty. Avraham knew the promises would come true. He could live with the uncertainty of not knowing how or when. And that is exactly what we are being called upon to do throughout Jewish history and especially today. There's a man in Israel whose son was among those murdered on October 7th. This man was sitting Shiva, and just before saying Kaddish, he read aloud to the people who were there the passage of Akedas Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. As if to say, I too, God, offered my son on your altar. But there is a deeper message in the connection of these two passages, the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, and the Kaddish prayer. Listen, please, to the words of the Rav, Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik. When the mourner recites, Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei Rabbah, glorified and sanctified is your great name, God, the mourner declares the following: no matter how powerful death is, notwithstanding the ugly end of man, however terrifying the grave is, however nonsensical and absurd everything appears, no matter how bleak one's despair is, we declare and profess publicly and solemnly that we are not giving up, that we are not surrendering, that we will carry on the work of our ancestors, that we will not be satisfied with anything less than the full realization of the ultimate goal, the establishment of God's kingdom, resurrection of the dead, eternal life for mankind, and peace in Israel. We will not give up. Let me share it with you in the form of a poem. This poem first appeared in a Facebook post. I do not know the name of the person who wrote it. It has now been shared widely throughout Israeli social media. I will share with you an excerpt of a translation. The translation was written by Daniel Gordis. And it is a poem of a woman in Israel who is 7 months pregnant. And she is speaking to her unborn child. 7-month little boy, this is not how I thought it would look. I imagined us in nature and streams, that your coming birth would fill our lives. We were wrapped in excitement and comfort, anticipating your arrival, arranging, dreaming, nesting. I didn't imagine that that pastoral image, little boy, would be replaced by sirens, missiles, and shelters, by sorrow that has spread like a blanket over the days and nights endless concern for family and loved ones, and an earth that trembles from its encounter with a brutal evil that we didn't want to believe existed. This week I asked you, my little boy, if you are sure this is where you want to come, to this world, to this earth. I told you that you have time to change your mind, and I will completely understand you, and I will have no complaints. And then I felt you. You smiled at me. And you explained it to me well that you do know where you have chosen to come. You're coming to this land, Eretz Yisrael. I understood in that moment, my brave soul, whatever you need from me, it's not inventing a perfect world for you. You need me to trust you and me, that you know to where you are coming and that it won't always be easy here. So I promise you today and always, my child, not that when you grow up there won't be more wars, only that I will always be here for you to embrace, contain, soften, and nurse, and to pour love and light into every crack and fracture when you're in pain, when the tears come, when reality tempts you to get tough. Mom is here with you all the way. And in whatever path you choose to walk, this world isn't perfect, child. And neither are we. And I can't really guarantee that you will succeed in creating a different, better reality. But I promise you with all my heart that we will never stop trying. My friends, I wish you a good day and peace in Israel. And I look forward to seeing you soon in person.